YouTube. All right, we're live.
I'm sure our fans are very grateful.
Of course.
They've just been refreshing their screens.
That's right. When is it starting? It's 2 minutes.
Episode 3 of season 2.
All right.
They're so engaged, they want to watch it at double time.
That's right. Well, call to order this regular meeting of the Easton Reading Region 9 Joint Boards of Education Policy Committee at 9:02 a.m. on January 22nd. First item to address is the approval of minutes from the December 18th, 2020 meeting, as well as the January 8th, 2021 Easton Reading and Region 9 Boards of Education Policy Committee special meetings. We did not have minutes from the January 15th due to a lack of quorum. Do I have a motion?
So moved as to all those minutes.
Okay. And a second from Maureen.
Sure.
All right. Very good. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Aye. And yes, Chris? Yes. Good. Okay. Unanimously approved. No members of the public being present. No public comment. Any committee member comment?
Just briefly, obviously, I missed last week, and our meeting was short the week before, but I do think there's a lot of cleanup with Go Guardian and a lot more downward digging that needs to happen. I said in an email to you all that I'd like to talk to the people who sold this program, because I think that they would be the sort of primary information for us. And I'd like to see how we could get that.
Yeah.
In a similar vein, I think we've talked about this a few times, but we probably need to start talking about a special meeting, whether it's in the evening or sometime when we can dedicate a chunk of time with the appropriate folks to kind of really figure out where we're at. A lot of things.
And make a to-do list coming out of that, because there's a number of policies. There are privacy ones. There's also got to be a little bit more streamlined work, I think, before something like Go Guardian is sort of instituted. And I don't know how they got to that. They seem to have had a process, but it wasn't comprehensive enough.
Yeah. I think I have all of those concerns, and not to mention we found the money comment about how they put it in, which Stephanie did not quite get to step on time. But that was alarming. Anyway, and we have to figure out how we're going to tee this up for the tri-board, because it is going to be an agenda item.
Yep. So. I think the intent is to essentially report back sort of the progress we've made, and that we will be having additional conversations about this. I think that's the level of sort of depth that we'll go into during the tri-board.
That's so much as what I said at the last ER9 meeting. That much more work needs to be done about this, and we're just starting. So welcome anyone's attendance at our various policy meetings if they wish to be informed at a micro level, but at a macro level, we'll be reporting back.
Right.
It flagged as an issue that other people might be concerned about, more so than the wording of a policy about some arcane thing that we are usually talking about.
Right. Okay, so we have agenda item number 5A, so continuing the 3000 series. So I believe we finished with the sort of going through the 3000 series the last time. I can bring it up if we want to sort of make sure that we actually got to the end there. But I think the primary takeaway was for us to connect with the transportation and the food services committees and to get their input on some of the policies that are inside of the 3000 series. So it sounds like if we're talking about an evening meeting or a meeting that'll be more convenient for sort of a greater number of board members, especially if we're going to sort of dive in on some of those policies and get the input from those committees. I think we may be able to lump all of that into one sort of bigger discussion.
With Go Guardian, I think Go Guardian stands alone.
Yeah, so on the Go Guardian front, I don't. So to me, I actually think it can be communicated succinctly, but it needs us to grab these relatively foreign concepts and summarize them inside of a few slides. And I'm not one. Well, I am one who says a slide can fix everything, but I don't think the slides can fix everything. But I think a clear summary that sort of communicates in a way that is going to be accessible to all the board members and sort of articulates, here is what we absolutely have to do in terms of filtering. Here is what, sort of GoGuardian does. Here is, to address that. Here's what they also do and where we have some concerns. And so then I think it leads to a very sort of simple conversation about should we be looking for, sort of pure filtering software, or should we be introducing additional controls that would relate to, sort of relate specifically to the implementation we already have. So, but so the way that I'm thinking about this is, if we prepare properly, we can have very sort of bright line conversations that sort of don't meander, but it requires us to do a fair amount of sort of heavy lifting on our side to make sure that people understand the concepts that we're talking about, because otherwise it's just, wait, are you talking about this? Are you talking about that? And it gets very messy very quickly, and it's not productive. So maybe as we do that work and in sort of creating the clear summaries of what this is, then we'll have a better sense of how long will this conversation really take, and whether or not we need to sort of split it up over multiple conversations. Okay, so I don't know if I think we may need to actually, we have tri-board governance structure in there, which I don't think that we're trying to get to today. The sort of continued work on the 3000 series, I don't know is necessarily accurate. Do we want to propose an amendment to the agenda to allow us to focus on sort of summarizing the sort of the conversations that we need to have with the Food Services Committee and Transportation Committees and those, or do we want to?
I would move that we amend the agenda to add an agenda item for right now, which is strategic priorities to the Policy Committee for the first quarter of 2021.
Do I have a second?
Sounds good to me.
Good. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so we're adding an agenda item to discuss strategic objectives, which I think is exactly what we need. Great. Okay, so do we want to start? I can share my screen, and we could look at a sort of blank page and just start brainstorming on those things, which I think is going to go pretty quickly. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure. And if you could probably tee up the other areas which are identified in the 3000 series where there are notes of speak to transportation, speak to food service.
Yes.
So somebody can take it upon themselves, volunteering to try and contact those committees and get a list of questions out there.
That sounds great. Okay. All right.
Is Stephanie joining us?
She is.
Okay.
I'm here.
Hi, Stephanie.
Okay. All right, and I'm going to share this with everyone here so we can add in real time. Okay. Okay. And I would say maybe it's under the heading of cross committee coordination, something like that.
Sounds good.
And transportation committee. Do we need? Does anyone have any recollection of sort of other places where we've identified committees that we should loop in?
I don't have a recall.
Okay.
John, can you hear me?
Yes. Stephanie? We can hear you, but I think you're cutting out a little bit.
Maybe John, under Go Guardian, is it just sort of a privacy heading, or a, social media is also in there to a certain extent? I mean, Go Guardian is the program that's sort of focusing our discussion, but it's a bigger discussion about privacy and there you go, digital citizenship. Perfect.
Privacy, digital citizenship, and oversight, something like that. We'll just call it that. Okay.
Of the technology committee.
Yeah.
So I have questions about that. There is a Board of Ed technology committee?
Apparently, I'm on it. We haven't met in ever.
I'm not on it.
Well, you could be.
I should be on that.
I think you could put yourself on it.
To my knowledge, there is not a Reading Technology Committee or a joint ER9 Technology Committee. I think there might be a Region 9 Technology Committee, which is why there's a disconnect.
I see.
I think there is a joint committee that has not, I think it's like transportation. It's just not active.
I've never even been asked to appoint anybody to a joint technology committee.
Yeah, I don't have it as an item listed on my committees.
On that piece of paper?
Yeah. So we should take a look at that.
And frankly, if that's something that we want to reinvigorate, we might want to talk about charging that on Tuesday if it all works into this conversation.
Right.
Yeah. Because I think there are, I have questions about, that tie into this about, I think there's a big difference between using this type of software on personal devices versus district-owned devices, similar to your expectation of privacy on your work computer versus your expectation of privacy when you're working from home on your own computer.
Agreed.
And then there's the other side of that coin, which is the equity piece about what a student's learning experience is like on school hardware versus personal hardware. And
okay. Do we have any other sort of hot button issues under the privacy and digital citizenship category?
We have never really done a deep dive on our own obligations vis-a-vis social media, John. I mean, briefly, there was a policy looked at when I first joined ER9 about our obligations individually. And I remember being alarmed because it suggested that my personal communications beyond my ER9 email could be grabbed. I think we have to look at our own board member obligations.
We looked at a policy like that and rejected it because it was overbearing from a First Amendment perspective, among other things. That's not to say that if you engage in business of the board through your own social media, that's not a public record, but that's just something everybody needs to understand.
Yeah.
Which is different than saying thou shalt not use social media.
Right.
No, I didn't in any way mean to suggest that. I just meant some more clear directives for board members about the, reining us in if appropriate and giving us some guardrails to speak would be appropriate.
Yeah. Is it in some ways a function of sort of FOIA?
Yeah, I think it is a function of FOIA, but it's also a function of how we guard ourselves. Tom had wanted, I know, last year, the year before, the FOIA expert whose name escapes me at the moment.
Tom Hennick.
Thank you, to come in and speak to the board, and it never happened.
I would greatly value that conversation. I have found myself in conversations where I've called him, talked to him, brought that back to members, and had them essentially reject his his ruling on what is and is not allowed.
So maybe he needs to give a broader presentation. I certainly would welcome it as well.
Yeah.
And I think I've been to 3 of his trainings, and the piece that is always missing that I think we have to also acknowledge is that he talked about freedom of information. He doesn't talk about record keeping obligations and retention obligations.
Agreed.
And that's something that is as or more important when it comes to this, because if you create a public record and then destroy it, you've created a whole different problem.
Right.
Agreed.
And so I think we have to find an expert to kind of handle that side of it, whether that's Shipman or somebody from the state library or something else. Like,
Okay.
And I think retention is probably a separate line item.
Okay. Good.
do we want to include in these strategic objectives sort of an interim summary of enumerated duties and responsibilities?
Yeah,
For
like
central office, sure.
the working
Yeah.
list that we have so far,
Right.
so to speak.
Rather than wait another year to make it pretty, say,
Yep.
hey, colleagues, just so you know, here are the 45 things we've already identified, and we're a third of the way through this work. So please be cognizant of it and understand that these are where our pressure points are.
Yep. I think it's something like create working version to amend it's, okay. Anything else that we would call out? I think certainly like getting through the rest of the policies and summarizing them, I'm concerned about the forked versions that are sort of inevitable over as we get sort of further from our starting point in terms of time. They're amending these policies and we're going to end up with, okay, we made these decisions on a policy that's not even relevant.
I wonder the extent to which we should start getting into the business of saying we're going to work through all the way to the 9,000 and we're going to flag all these ones with issues.
Right.
And our version 0.9 of the policy book is just going to exclude all of those.
Right.
And we're going to adopt 1 to 10,000 minus these 25 that require us to dig a little deeper. So we at least have commonality as to those 90% of policies. I don't love that as a solution, but it's a way to kind of get across the finish line, at least in part.
Interesting. So it's sort of essentially saying we're adopting all these policies except for these. We're flagging these that we're not adopting without further review.
Something to that effect. It's ugly as a process, but it's a function of what's better, living in 3 outdated worlds now or living in a partially updated world and a partially not updated world.
It also magnifies the degree to which we have to do work right now because we're going on 2 forked paths, right? We have to do this work. I see this work as essential to happen in an immediate time frame. I don't think you can delay the work on the screen to do the other work. So we're making larger our lift.
Right.
Yeah, I'm whether it's that path or really any other that I can imagine, I'm concerned about our process for sort of getting buy-in from the boards. If I'm a member of the board who has not participated in this process, I have a lot of questions. Okay, so we're sort of wholesale replacing the policies. I think one of the first challenges is to say, let's be clear, you're not aware of what's in the current policies right now, probably, right? And if you are, then great. Like, let's dig in on that conversation and figure out how we can do the delta analysis. But
we've been telegraphing, John, for as long as I've been sitting here, that this is a wholesale review, that it is going to be incredibly substantive, and that it may generate a lot of questions. And we have repeatedly telegraphed, if you want to see the nature of this substantive lift, come to these Friday meetings. That has been repeatedly telegraphed. And if there's a stronger way to telegraph it, let's go.
Or watch the videos. They're all there now.
I agree. And I have been saying that same message. I don't think that's going to stop people from saying, whoa, hold on a second, what's going on? So what I'm concerned about is not that I think I can remedy that, because I do agree that we have communicated again and again that, we're engaged in this process. What I'm concerned about is how can we give people a level of comfort that you're going to be able to digest this without having to watch, dozens or about 100 videos. Right?
That's a trust issue. Do you trust the work that we have done?
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, there are those on our boards who don't, who are going to want to verify themselves as well. So I think about the summary of the policies and the way that we sort of lay them out, and the ease with which somebody could go through and say, okay, I see the policy on this, there's a policy on this and this and this and this and this, and maybe there are, 200 policies. As I look through that list, I say, that one I'm not worried about, that one I'm not worried about. Simply in the titling of the policies, I see I'm not worried about those. And then, I definitely want to dive in on that one and that one and that one and that one. And giving people that ability, I think is, and frankly, I think actually should be our ultimate output, is one consolidated policy document that is easy to, sort of traverse, right? Sort of easy for people to consume, to search for, to, sort of drill in on and understand.
Right. I wonder if, from a buy-in perspective, this sort of opportunity for an interim report on Tuesday allows us to say, here's where we started and here's where we are. We've gone through the 1,000, the 2,000, the 3,000s. Here's sort of here's a list of, here's all of the policies that we've all agreed to, basically. Mm-hmm. Here's the handful that we're still sort of drilling down on. But understand that we are all comfortable with this right now, and create a certain level of, you're almost planting a flag that says, this is settled at this point as part of our process.
Agreed.
Now we're moving into this phase of it. So if you've all indicated that you don't want to be part of this phase, now we're moving into this phase. This is your new invitation to be part of this phase.
Right. And we can clearly delineate that some of these policies were just wordsmithing. All we did was separate out duties from, aspirational things. We slimmed down. And if anyone has questions about that, you need to talk to us about why we did it that way. But we took out aspirational language. It was that simple.
Right. And I think restating our core principles. And I think that right. document that we sort of laid out at the beginning of the process, where we said, like, here's what's going to guide this, that we're not looking, it's not going to have the regs in here. It's not going to have the aspirational language. It's going to be purely a way of capturing our sort of obligations under law.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a matter of underscoring that what we're doing is not controversial. It's tedious. Yeah. But it shouldn't be controversial. And so we expect a certain level of trust and buy-in in that process. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly what we've done should not be controversial at all. Mm-hmm. Some of this stuff that's up on your screen now mm-hmm. would clearly have controversial.
Right. Which I think is exactly why we all sort of gut checked it and called it out, because we all have that sort of calibrated sense of, this is obvious, this requires further discussion.
Yeah. And I actually think that the more we can make clear where there were questions that needed input from food services, from transportation committee, from technology committee, where we felt there was a particular sensitivity. We are bringing it back to everyone. Everything else is
Right.
relatively mundane.
We're not making policy decisions in the governance sense. We're making policy decisions in the wording sense.
Right. Okay. Anything else that we think would be useful in terms of articulating our progress to date?
Well, you had spoken earlier about sort of updating the most urgent policies. I mean, I have 2 policies on my mind right now that I kind of need to add to our priority list queue. But I think that's certainly been a focus of the committee as well, sort of looking at where there have been legislative updates that require our attention more immediately.
Yeah, and that I think is actually part of our core process, is that that statement of when we have a sort of urgent matter, we review those as they come in, and they don't necessarily go to the back of the line if there's an urgency in understanding those and recommending them for approval by the full boards.
Are there 2 more policies, Stephanie, that you're now introducing to us that we need to chat about?
A continued conversation about Title IX.
Mm-hmm.
So we really need to, I'm going to be in contact with Gwen Zatoun from Shipman today, because all of our Title IX school level coordinators need to be following the exact same process. They're all following the law generally, but they'd like to be using the same forms. And so I would like her to review the forms. We have to be sure that all the websites include all the right postings, and the law went into effect in August. And so we were going to have some type of legal review of our policy, but I need to operationalize the policy. And we're doing that work right now. So it seems to me that that's one of the more urgent ones. And the other has to do with the school climate policy that recently changed as well. And so that change needs to be in effect this year. And that's another one where we have an internal tri-district school climate committee. And they've discussed changes, but I think that we need to update but I think, did I send to someone, maybe several of you, the general statutes update?
I don't
remember seeing it.
Okay, then I will send that today.
Okay.
Stephanie, on the Title IX materials, I'm sure Shipman will have more insight into this, but I do think that you're probably going to, with the new administration, see some change to that pretty quickly. That doesn't mean we're, absent complying with the old rules. Yep. But this itself is a heavy lift, in that I think we're going to see new rules pretty quick.
Yeah, I agree. In the 2 webinars that I've attended by different legal groups, they've said the same thing, but they said that a change will take, it could be several months to see that change. So in the meantime, we still need to be following the current. Hopefully
that change will have some retroactive forgiveness for non-compliance in it. And I suspect it will.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I am no expert, but I would suspect somebody's going to write that in.
So I have to jump, but if everyone wants to continue, you should be able to. I can leave the stream running, and I can just stop my video and mute my line. And then it'll record until you end it.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Did John leave his screen shared, or he took that with him? You're muted.
You share the document with us, so one of us can theoretically pull up the document and share screen too.
Okay. Stephanie, speaking back to your Title IX stuff, does Shipman have the sense of urgency that we should comply immediately? Because that would be where I would start with.
Yes.
Start with the sense of, do you really think we need to comply with this like pronto? And they're going to be conservative. They're going to say, of course, comply. But you will be able to read between the lines to see if they anticipate flexibility for you going forward. Because otherwise, you're doing this heavy lift twice.
Yes, so I agree that they will take the conservative approach and tell us, of course, we need to comply. So we have conducted Title IX investigations under the new law. The difference is that there are many different roles that need to be assigned in the process.
Okay.
So we have made our own determinations about the people who should serve in those different roles. My greater concern in terms of compliance is just having the correct website postings, because if there's ever an issue and we don't have the right information publicly available, then that's of course a problem.
As an interim step, could you perhaps make the Title IX coordinator very obvious on the website and say something like direct inquiries here, and then, you know, feed off?
That is available. So that's available, but we are supposed to be posting a lot more than just the right contact. So we have the district level contact. The different roles include the building level coordinator, and then the investigator, and then the decision maker. And the decision maker, of course, can't be the investigator. And ideally, the investigator is not the same person as the coordinator, but it may be the same person as the coordinator. So okay. in a place of our size, it's very hard not to have some overlap of roles. So we're trying to determine all the right people who are available who could serve in those roles. And so there could be crossovers. It could be a crossover in the district. So an investigator could be at the school level, whereas the designated coordinator on record might be the person who's at the other school in the district for the K-8s. At the high school, it just requires more people to have the appropriate training so that they can be the person on record to serve in those roles. But process-wise, I think we're doing just fine. We're responding appropriately. We're certainly complying with the law. It's the documentation side of things that I think needs an update.
From a purely policy perspective, and given the likelihood that the regulations will change within a year, would it be possible to basically create an interim policy that basically says that the boards fully delegate the authority to promulgate regulations in compliance with Title IX and to identify the appropriate folks in compliance with the appropriate regulations under Title IX, and make that our policy to eliminate any sort of conflicts between a policy and an appropriate regulation?
With the view that we will review same within 1 year.
And you could say this policy will expire on such and such a date, even if you wanted to sunset it, so that it was a clear signal that what we're trying to do is make sure the administration is acting within the constructs of the current law with an expectation that it's going to change, and we're in the process of reflecting that future change in a future policy.
I think that makes sense. I think the handbooks were all updated with sort of, I'm sure not that exact language, but something.
I mean, alternately, we have the ability to suspend the operation of policies by a supermajority vote or whatever it is. We could all act to suspend the current Title IX policy and direct the administration to follow the regulations.
I like that.
That might be better than creating a policy that says it's a not policy.
Right. I like that, Chris. I did not know you had the ability to do that, but I like that.
I'm pretty sure you do. And I think that's probably, we might want to even do that on Tuesday.
Right. Right.
And Chris, can you put that in writing and send that to me in a note, because I might not have gotten every word.
Yeah, I will do my best.
And if you put that into effect, I mean, it's a simple, clear, straightforward presentation to get that supermajority. Hello, folks. We can do this lift twice, or we can do it once. And administration is doing it, making sure we're in compliance. So we're going to do it once.
We're going to do it once, and we're going to do it right and thoughtfully, and it'll probably be sometime in June.
Right. Gwen, does that seem okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, in terms of the climate issues, Stephanie, how do you think that we as policy should begin to approach those?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at, sorry, I'm looking at my email. Looks like I sent this just to John and Chris, so sorry I didn't include the entire group. Let me forward again to the group, and you can just take a look. So it looks like there's some new wording that get not later than January 1, 2021. Subsection G. I don't think this policy has been updated. Well, I don't know for a fact, but my hunch is it hasn't been updated since the original expectation from the state that we form such a group, that we have this kind of policy.
Morning.
Good morning.
Chris, do you know if CABE came out with anything in response to this act?
My guess is that they did at some point in the past 2 years since it was enacted. I'd have to dig and see. I'm looking at the statute now.
And I'm reading or skimming the bill that Stephanie just forwarded here.
This writing. Another thing I want to speak about is that this writer really thought about their audience, because as the author was writing it,
Page 8 has a lot of new language.
Another thing I want us to really notice in this writing piece are those paragraphs. Okay, your expectation is to have those paragraphs. Remembering that we practiced the whole first week of our opinion writing, that introduction.
Chris, Public Act 19-166 became CGS what? Do you know?
I don't know. Let's see.
Stephanie, what do you think the time frame is for this second issue? Is it a today time frame? Like one of us should probably come up with some kind of language, whether we dig down on CABE. What do you think the timeline is on this?
No, I would say in the next couple of months. I would say that the leadership teams in each school are following this new guidance. And it's really not a big departure from what they were doing previously, but they just wanted to note that there is a need to update our policy.
Okay. All right. So if we put it on our, master sooner rather than later list, that would make sense, as opposed to someone doing a deep dive before the tri-board meeting.
Oh, yes. No, I certainly don't think it has to be
Okay.
before Tuesday.
Okay.
I think we need to probably find out whether Cape did this, and I certainly have to link it to a Connecticut general statute and do some reading if we're going to start from scratch.
Yeah, Title 10 somewhere.
Yeah. All right. I guess de facto, I'm sort of trying to lead this conversation. Stephanie, do you think that there's anything else that needs to be on an immediate address list sooner than the list that we have going?
So we've been talking about the use of GoGuardian. So I think in that same category is the acceptable use policy. And I think if we're going to talk about GoGuardian, we need to talk about the acceptable use policy.
I think for the policy committee's purposes for the tri-board meeting, and I don't know if you heard our discussion about this, I think what we're going to try and do is sort of tee up the work that we did and then the bigger picture work. And that may involve reconstituting a technology committee that doesn't seem to have met to take a view of GoGuardian. And that seems to be the prevailing wisdom coming out of this meeting.
Yeah, I don't recall a board technology committee in all of
I don't recall one either, but Gwen seemed to recall one. So
you're muted.
On that spreadsheet that had all of the committees, and then some people are in red, and I can never get used to, because I always have R after my name in parentheses, which is not how I identify as an R, but it's Reading. On that sheet, I am identified as being on a technology committee.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
So maybe then the other suggestion is for us to go back to each of the individual boards and reconstitute that committee, either as a committee of the whole of the tri-board, and Chris probably knows more about this than I certainly do, or as individual committees. But I do think there's general consensus that GoGuardian needs to be dug down on a little bit more than we felt, or I certainly felt 2 weeks ago when I heard about it, 3 weeks ago.
I do think generally the concept of having a tri-district technology-focused committee is of increasing import, particularly as we move curriculum resources to technological platforms and we develop more remote learning capabilities. Some processes and procedures to bring together the technology piece, the operation and finance piece, and the curriculum piece, I think is important. And the technology piece is missing from a governance perspective at the moment.
Right. And I do think you'll continue to see, technology be used in the sense that snow days have probably gone the way of the rotary dial phone.
Right. And privacy has gone the way of the rotary dial phone too, in a lot of ways.
Well, we're trying to pull back against that one, or at least
I mean culturally. And so we just have to be aware of that and calibrate within our legal obligations and our sort of cultural expectations as a community. So.
Yeah, and to me, communication is just such a big part of this. So I have been reviewing the templates on the GoGuardian website for communication, and I asked my assistant to set up a meeting with Rydell and Damian Russell, who's one of our IT heads, on this topic to just talk about how we might communicate what we're currently doing. So at least we have something in the near term.
We spoke briefly.
If we're already doing this, parents certainly need to be informed.
Right. We also spoke about, whoever was the seller of this program to you, or the initial agent contact you had, maybe being able to loop them in so that they could give us sort of the firsthand account of what the technology would do, as opposed to the user account, which is different. Mm-hmm. They may be able to inform the discussion. At least I think they would. But.
Yeah, it really came to us rather organically. A teacher at the high school was piloting a program that included the use of Chromebooks, and he was using GoGuardian really as an instructional tool in his classroom in person. And then Helen Keller began a pilot just of the teacher level use of it, not using the administrative tool. So it was really only for in-school use. The only change in the tool then occurred when the Technology Advisory Committee thought that it provided broader security for our students when they were on their ER9 accounts doing work at home as a filter more than just the CEN filter, which only works at school. And that's when we made the upgrade to the product, and on the basis of its broad use across the state of Connecticut and other Connecticut school districts. But this is where I personally would really benefit from a digital learning director, because I don't understand the ins and outs of the tech side of things. I do understand the educational use and the general purpose of filtering and security.
Right.
But the privacy issues are real. And I think for that reason, we do need to have a better understanding.
Does the program itself come through Pearson, or who does it come through?
It's not a Pearson product.
Okay.
Let's see. I actually have their website up as one of my tabs, so I can tell you.
I mean, this is a question I could probably answer on my own, Stephanie. I just thought if you knew off the top of your head that we could, start there with trying to contact someone from at a program level who would otherwise, even a marketing person.
Right. So on the bottom of their website, it says, "Made with love in California, 2020 limited." Made with love. Isn't that what you want to see in an educational product that provides security?
I don't know about that.
I'm not sure where love factors in, but.
Yeah, that's what it says on the telescreens in 1984 too.
Yeah, damn.
So their line is, GoGuardian provides Chromebook management solutions to keep students safer online and make teaching easier. That's what it says on their website. So all I can see is Liminex as the parent
Liminex
corporation.
Maureen, for reference, 10-222 is probably the statute where the school climate stuff is coming in. There's a whole bunch of subsections that reference climate.
Terrific. Okay. I don't have anything further to add for today's purposes. Do any of you? I think we need some direction about our next steps, both for the tri-board meeting and for us. And I missed Mr. Stinson because he's an excellent project manager and he can define those things pretty clearly. But if I were to do it, I think that each of us needs to take an attempt to contact and try and set up, food services at least, and transportation, because that seems, of the things we've discussed today, actually the easiest piece of this to me. In that our information is accessible, knowable, and in a particular place. Does anyone disagree?
No, I think echoing the output from this is, I assume John would lead a discussion or a report really on Tuesday as to the status of our work and the expectations going forward and where we need to cross collaborate with other committees. And then that sets up the discussions with food service and transportation, as well as theoretically the creation or recreation of a technology committee and the sort of direction of that discussion that away.
In terms of homework for next week, so that we don't arrive here with sort of no agenda and no things to do. That's more what I was looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I was more looking for what are our next steps in this small group next Friday or whenever we next meet.
So for my part, I will follow up with Gwen Zatoun from Shipman to just get her read on the urgency of the Title IX policy in particular.
Okay.
And that would be helpful. I'm interested, I think I was driving in a dead zone when you were discussing the items that were on the shared document that John had up earlier. And I think under technology, there was something around student learning. Can you help me understand that a little bit more?
Let me find that.
How the policy would be a part of that?
I think that arose from a comment I made about equity with respect to the application of various software on school-owned devices versus personal devices and what those impacts are.
Yeah.
Okay.
And making sure that we have, sort of a distinguishing element, right? Both in the way we communicate to parents about how the technology is used and the way that they can interface and pull back and say, hey, look, on my personal device, no. If they can. Right?
Yes. I mean, I think it would be helpful actually just to name the equity element, because I think that's critical. I mean, honestly, it's been especially important during this time when we're going in and out of remote teaching to make sure that students have access, but then also the appropriate support.
Okay, in terms of next week, hopefully you can come back and tell us how urgent we need to do Title IX work. And for the purposes of the tri-board, we will advance a policy perhaps that explains in the context of whatever John is teeing up, that basically we're deferring to you at this point, and we will have a non-policy for now or something along those lines.
Right. We'll suspend the policy for now and delegate the complete authority of the administration or something to that effect to.
Right. Okay, but in terms of our work, Chris and Gwen, what do you think we need to do as opposed to Stephanie for next week?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. How much of next week is going to be cleaning up from whatever the tri-board resolution is, and how much of that is going to be sort of plowing ahead? I don't know. We want to break ground on the 4,000s at this point while we have so many open items.
No, I think we should individually, you, Gwen, and I should reread the transportation and the food service things to see what we have to ask to whom, at least. Is that fair for our homework?
Yeah, Gwen and I sit on the transportation committee. I don't know who amongst us might be on food service. I don't think anybody, but.
Okay, so then that would really actually be very helpful. Who else is on food service? I'm transportation besides you guys.
I think it's Randy and Mike.
Okay.
D'Agostino.
When is the next transportation meeting?
It's not active.
Whenever we tell Randy we need a meeting.
Right. It's only really active when we're negotiating a bus contract, pretty much. I mean.
All right. So maybe transportation, since you all are keyed in, is our focus for next week, so that we can plow through that. And then maybe we're going to tell you to direct them to have a meeting so we can do it all together and get rid of that.
Right. I mean,
it sounds now like the smallest of this work.
Yeah, I would be happy to even send Randy an email this morning saying that in the next few weeks, we're going to want a special meeting of the transportation committee because there are policy issues that we're going to discuss. We're going to start identifying on Tuesday and bring to you in greater detail going forward.
Sounds good to me.
Because these things take weeks to schedule sometimes. So
yeah, change is slow.
It's not like it's budget season or anything.
No, of course not.
No. There are no other.
It's not like you're in a pandemic with remote learning that moves in and out. It's not. Or like me, you have 3 trials going at once.
And all your trials all remote?
Yeah, they are, Stephanie. I mean, we have priority 1 matters that get you into a courtroom and some criminal matters, but my trials are civil. And yes, they are all remote. And the logistical hurdles, you wouldn't have wanted to see me last week.
I only learned for the first time last week that they're letting the public come into the courtroom to watch virtual hearings.
Only in certain courtrooms. That's completely PJ dependent.
Which is the whole public access thing is bizarre to me at the moment.
Right. Bridgeport is still very shut down. Milford was fairly open until they had a cluster of cases, and now they are very shut down. Those are my primary experiences. So anyway.
It's fascinating, though, how the remote participation in some cases really does affect process and substance in meetings. I mean, I find this all the time. Just if I'm running a meeting, especially if people don't have their video on, it's such an entirely different experience. And I can only imagine trying to make legal decisions.
In one of my cases, I had to go so far as to get a body language expert involved because I was very concerned about some truth telling or lack thereof. This was a while ago in the summer, and the case eventually settled, but that was fascinating to me. How do you assess truth remotely? And it is much more language and pattern dependent than body language, right? So we went and did a deep dive even on how people say yes. Women in particular say yes with an inflection at the end. They go up, yes, no. On a remote proceeding, you really have to focus on the declarative voice. So that was one of the things I learned from that body language person. But it's been fascinating. It's been very helpful for things like, and Chris knows this, for status conferences. So us lawyers are not traveling across the state to say, hi, I'm here. But it's not good for contested hearings.
The insurance defense folks are very upset because they lose all the windshield time from driving back and forth to those conferences.
Right.
How
And
do you
the people,
sequester a jury?
you don't.
You don't have a
haven't.
jury.
We don't have jury trials right now.
Oh.
We can't. They're trying in federal court, or so I've read, but with no success. And I think the last memo I saw that came out basically put them off well into 2021, into the fall.
If you want a jury, you're just getting in line and waiting at this point.
Right. You'll take a
For a
bench
long
trial
time.
first.
I read about a jury trial they pulled off in Texas, and within a few days, basically half the people involved were positive.
Mm.
Yeah, you can't.
It's a crazy thing to attempt.
It's bizarre, but it does make for a lot of efficiencies for status conferences, and it's taken whole loads of attorneys who used to do per diem work out of business because their sole work, particularly in New York, and Chris probably knows this, was going to do some of these smaller status conferences where you would literally be in court for 5 minutes, but they would do 10 of them for 10 different firms. And now,
You'd be sitting there all day, and you just knock them off one after another after another.
right. Anyway, we've gotten far afield, and I'm sure you all have other things to do, and I have to prepare for Tuesday. So on that note, I think we are concluded for today. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend.